Hello and welcome to A Second Look. My name is Evan McConnell. In this episode, I'm going to look back at the Portland Timbers run in MLS's back. I'll analyze how Giovanni Savarese set up his team and tactics that eventually led to them winning the whole tournament. Let's take a second look. The first thing that should strike most fans when they look back on Portland's run to winning MLS's back is the lack of possession for the Timbers. Portland controlled just 36% in the final against Orlando, as well as in a group stage game against LAFC. Only 38% against Philadelphia and New York City FC in the quarterfinals and semifinals, and 48% against the LA Galaxy. The only games Portland controlled more than 50% was against Houston in the group stage and FC Cincinnati in the round of 16. Those two matches ended up being the most challenging for Portland, as they conceded 24 shots to Houston and only won on penalties against lowly Cincinnati, who also had a big last-second chance to win the game. Now, it's important to note that the Timbers weren't outpossessed because they were outclassed. Giovanni Savarese made a specific tactical decision to allow the opponent possession. Let's take a look at how Portland's defensive shape impacted this. When defending, the Timbers' 4-2-3-1 appeared more like a 4-5-1, or even 6-3-1 at times. Fullbacks Chris Duval and Jorge Villafana tucked in extremely narrow in support of the center backs. Then the outside midfielders, Sebastian Blanco and Marvin Loria or Jimmy Chara, acted as wingbacks, closing down crosses. Defensive midfielders Eric Williamson and Diego Chara sat right on top of the center backs, further clogging spaces centrally. By using the wingers to defend the cross, the fullbacks were able to cover any backdoor passes into the channel, while also adding another body to defend against low crosses to the near post. Then the weak side winger tucked infield, and added then a third central midfielder to further clog the center of the pitch. This shape, specifically when the ball was wide, meant Portland had plenty of numbers in the box, usually both center backs, the weak side fullback, and one or both central midfielders. Having the fullbacks narrow meant that the center backs rarely had to chase a run into the wide areas, and as a result, Portland were almost never out of position and exploited on crosses. Those that did connect with the forward usually ended in difficult shooting positions. Portland used the already narrow shape to make it a nightmare for opponents to play through. There were several instances of an attack trying to play through the center, and the two blocks of 8 for Portland all swarming in, making it impossible for the ball not only to get through on the goal, but to go wide either, let alone anywhere but to a Portland player to clear the lines. Whenever the Timbers had an opponent in either of these two positions, it was important for the defense to keep the ball where it is. When the ball came down the middle, for example, the wingers squared up to the ball from the outside, forcing the attacker to drive into the midfield shredders of Williamson and Chara. When the ball went down the wing, it was up to the winger or even the fullback to prevent the pass from coming infield. Portland were happy to have control in either of these situations, when they're already sitting back in defense and can force the opponent to either cross the ball into a crowded box or dribble into a wall of players. The reason the Timbers tried to prevent the ball from switching lanes was because they were most exposed when forced to shift when the ball went to the weak side. Portland were obviously exposed also when an opponent could counterattack and drive at Mabiala or Zuparic, which is a large reason why the Timbers sat back, to prevent isolating them in the open. Now let's look at Portland going the other way. Part of sitting deep on defense is then the desire to counterattack the other way. The Timbers have been an elite counterattacking team for a long time, and this style of play suits that. The first main aspect to the Timbers' counterattack comes down to Savarese's inclination to defend first. That being, Portland were extremely worried about the counter-press after trying to play out. Because of this, the Timbers usually only sent 3 or 4 players forward during these counters. Especially against teams like Philly and LAFC who like to press, Portland put themselves in a position where even if they were counter-pressed out of possession, they would still have at least 6 men back to defend. Because of the lack of numbers, Portland didn't overwhelm opponents on its counterattack. It was usually late game, when up a goal, that Portland looked the most lethal on counterattacks. The passing pattern here is important to how Portland counterattacked with these 4 players, and in fact was almost identical to how they played with the ball when in possession further up the pitch. When playing from deep, however, the first pass was almost always looking for the winger, Blanco, Loria, or Chara. Rarely did Portland use this first pass to play into a Bobase with his back to goal. Once the ball went wide, Portland always looked forward. The 4 counterattacking players situated themselves in a diamond, with the ball carrier wide, a Bobase in front of the center backs, and specifically shading to the far-sided center back. The attacking center midfielder, whether Valeri or not, remained centrally. not looking for a square pass, but instead in a position to recover a second ball off of the next pass. The other winger pushed up into the half space, completing the weak side of the diamond. Now with the ball on the wing, and it was predominantly with Blanco, his first look is to play it into the striker's feet, which is often a 30 to 40 yard pass. That's a lot of belief in Abobase's ability to settle the ball, and on Valeri or any other attacking midfielder to clean up any poor touches. When there was space to counter, it was all about streaming forward and keeping the field spread in that diamond. This allowed the attackers room for 1v1s, and if they outnumbered the defenders, major openings for runners to exploit. That's Portland's game plan when in a low block, both in possession and in the attack. Now let's switch gears and look at how they played in the high block. We'll stay with the Timbers in possession. Looking back, 2019 was a difficult season for Portland because most teams sat back on them and forced the Timbers to play through the lines, which isn't their strong suit. MLS's back showed us how Giovanni Savarese worked around possession and began playing in a direct counterattacking style even against a team sitting deep. We'll continue to see a similar pattern of play from Portland when they attack from their own half on counters as in this section farther up the field. We'll look now at two types of passes Portland mostly tried to avoid, which were vertical passes from the center of the field and square passes from wide to the center of the field. The few times we did see these types of passes, Portland were immediately countered on, and the opponents should have done a better job converting these opportunities into goals. The pattern of play that Portland used, which we'll see an alarming amount of times, is an inside-out pass from a center back or fullback to the near side wing, just like before, and then another look forward. Though sometimes it goes wide to the fullback, and his pass is the one that is immediately looking for the target forward. Ideally, he would play it to the winger, but this is sometimes bypasses a step. In these situations, the attacking midfielder is more likely to be tighter to the forward in anticipation of that second ball. When it does go to the winger, the difference here is that the player who receives it is in the wide area can now go into a 1v1. This has to happen a lot because Blanco is usually so isolated in the diamond attack that he can't lay it off to another player, so he often has to push the ball up the end line or cut it back to his right into the half space. When the ball goes into the winger here, no matter his choice, it's time to make a positive play towards goal. We end up seeing a variety of plays when the ball comes here. The first is the winger going one-on-one, pushing the ball down the line and putting in a cross. Jeremy Ebobisse is a solid target forward, and as such is also a threat in the box. When Blanco cuts it down the line on his left, he wants to look for Ebobisse and give him a chance to win an aerial duel, and if not, hope to get a second ball. The second option is when Blanco can cut it onto his favored right foot and put himself in a position where he can either curl a back post cross or shoot it from distance. A third option is a pass from a deeper position into a forward's feet. Likely to be swarmed here, so he'll need support from another player for a combination such as a layoff or a 1-2. A fourth is a ball into the channel. With Ebobisse marked and the opposing fullback stepped up to the winger, there's often space for either an overlapping or inside-out run for the ball to be played into the channel. And we'll see this play result into some really good chances, including this goal against New York City FC. The most important aspect of how Portland played in the attack wasn't necessarily which type of play they used and when, just that the Timbers wanted to swing the ball wide, and then allow that winger the chance to make a play, and put Portland in a position where they could either set up a shot or shoot directly off the ball from the winger. They didn't want to meddle around in possession, especially in the midfield. Even when the opponent was playing deep, it was about playing direct and aggressive. On the other side of the ball, the Timbers avoided playing in the middle block that many MLS teams seem to prefer to play in, and while we saw them defending deep in their own area, they also had instances of a high press that put defenses under immense pressure. Like the counterattack, Portland didn't want to risk pushing too many men up the field for the risk of getting hit on the counter, so it was usually just one or two players who moved around, slowly pressuring the opponents into a pass. The wingers were set, usually up on the opposing fullbacks, ready to pounce on a pass and put that fullback in a bad position, which did happen on occasion. Unlike the way other teams pressed, Portland didn't wait for the ball to come to one side of the field and then swarm with four more players. It was just up to that one winger to make a play on the fullback, or else the chance to win the ball was gone. The other pass that the Timbers looked to capitalize on was a vertical pass from a center back into a midfielder. With opponents controlling possession in numbers, there were times where they became complacent in possession, and these lazy passes put their own midfielders under unneeded pressure, where guys like Williamson and Shara, who are great at winning the ball back, are right behind them. It's already a difficult ball to control with your back to goal, and several counters were initiated because Portland won the ball back in these positions. The only time we saw Portland pressing everyone up the field was when they knew they could corner a team in, such as when they just lost the ball in the corner or off a throw-in in a similar area. The direct nature of this team meant that even on defense, Portland pushed forward and won a lot of balls off of vertical passes and clearances that then put them in a position to create a chance within 2 passes. We even end up seeing quite a few goals come from these presses, and if not the initial shot, it came off the resulting set piece. That'll bring me to the final topic I wanted to look at when analyzing how the Timbers played during MLS is back, which is set pieces. It's easy to look at how Portland scored 4 set-piece goals in the finals and semifinals and say, oh, the Timbers were lucky, but there's more to it than that. Obviously, delivery from guys like Valeri and Blanco raises the chances to score, but there was an interesting trend in these set pieces. When we look at some of the corner kicks from earlier in the tournament, and even in these games, we can see that Valeri targets the near post on most of his corner kicks. After sending one near post, the defense expects another, and Portland run 3 or 4 men to the near post and drag out defenders. And when the cross curls over those first runners, there's space and a chance for an individual duel, and the Timbers took advantage of this misdirection. It's an interesting case study to look at this series against Orlando. The first corner comes to the near post and threatens the Lions' goal as it's cleared for another corner. It seems now that it's going to be another near post cross, judging by the runs and the dangerous nature of the first, but then it flies over almost everyone, as the majority of runners and defenders streak past the near post. When it flies over their heads, now there is time and space for Portland to take advantage of a frantic situation as the ball rockets around the box. With Sebastian Blanco out for the season, it'll be difficult for the Portland Timbers to revisit these tactics should they qualify for MLS Cup playoffs. If you noticed something else on how Portland played during MLS is back, or if you noticed a change in tactics when they return to play, please leave it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Until next time, I'm Emmett McConnell. Have a great day.